My father's will was explicit, yet my brother George demanded my inheritance, claiming his children made him more deserving. When my mother Angela threatened to disown me if I refused, I boarded a plane. By the time I landed, I had frozen their assets, and their threats had turned into desperate begging. This is where the real story begins, and trust me, you won't want to miss how deep this betrayal goes. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Have you ever had to choose between family and your own self-respect? Let us know in the comments. The coffee in my cup had gone cold 3 hours ago, but I couldn't bring myself to move. The office of Simon, my father's longtime attorney and arguably his only true friend, smelled of old leather and lemon polish, a scent that usually brought me comfort. Today, it made me nauseous. Outside the frosted glass windows, London was gray and weeping rain against the pane, matching the dull, throbbing ache that had settled behind my eyes since the funeral 3 days ago. I was 34 years old, a forensic accountant who spent her days hunting down hidden assets and exposing corporate fraud. Yet here I was, shaking like a leaf because of a piece of paper lying on a mahogany desk. "Martha," Simon said gently, his voice rough with the same grief I felt. He pushed a box of tissues toward me, his hand trembling slightly. He was 70, a man of iron constitution, but losing Dad had broken something in him, too. "You need to hear this part clearly. Your father was very specific. He knew this would happen." I looked up, my eyes stinging. "They're not going to accept it, Simon. You saw them at the wake." George was already measuring the curtains in Dad's study. "It doesn't matter what they accept," Simon said, his tone hardening into professional steel. "It matters what is legal. And this," he tapped the thick document, "is ironclad. The portfolio, the liquid assets, and the deed to the lakeside property are yours, solely yours." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my heart rate. "And George?" "George receives the standard allowance your father set up 10 years ago. A fixed monthly stipend, adjusted for inflation, managed by a trust. He cannot touch the principal. He cannot leverage it for loans. And," Simon paused, looking over his spectacles with a grim expression, "he receives the forgiveness of the loans he already took." I closed my eyes. "How much, Simon?" 200,000, Simon whispered. "Your father kept a ledger. George borrowed against his inheritance for years. Dad just never told you because he didn't want you to hate your brother." I didn't hate George. Not yet. I just felt a profound, hollow disappointment. My father, a man who had built a logistics empire from a single delivery van, had spent his final years being bled dry by my older brother, and he had suffered in silence to keep the peace. "Does George know?" I asked. "He knows there is a meeting today," Simon said. "He refused to come to my office. He said he was too distraught and that he would wait for you at your mother's house." I checked my watch. It was 4:00 p.m. The reading was technically done. I was now a very wealthy woman, but I felt poorer than I ever had in my life. The man who had been my anchor was gone, and I was about to walk into a lion's den armed with nothing but a legal document and a broken heart. "Martha," Simon said, standing up as I gathered my coat. He walked around the desk and took my hands. "Be careful. Grief does strange things to people, but greed makes them monsters. If you need me, I am a phone call away." "I can handle them," I lied. "They're family." "That's exactly why you should be afraid," Simon replied ominously. I left his office and hailed a cab. The ride to my childhood home, a sprawling Victorian estate in Kensington, felt like a funeral procession. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from George. "Hurry up, Mom is upset. We need to settle the finances so we can grieve properly." The message chilled me. Settle the finances so we can grieve. As if the grief was a luxury item that could only be purchased once the check cleared. I stared at the screen, the raindrops blurring the city lights outside, and realized that the brother I remembered, the one who used to push me on the swings and chase away bullies, had died a long time ago. The man waiting for me in that house was a stranger wearing my brother's face. I paid the driver and stood before the black oak door. I didn't knock. I used my key, the metal cold against my thumb. As I stepped into the foyer, the sound of raised voices drifted from the drawing room. "It's ridiculous, Angela, absolutely ridiculous." George's voice was booming, echoing off the marble floors. "She's single. She lives in a one-bedroom apartment. What is she going to do with that kind of capital? I have 3 kids. I have school fees. I have a mortgage too. Hat is suffocating me." "I know, darling, I know," my mother's voice soothed, a tone she never used with me. "We will talk to her. Martha is reasonable. She knows her place." She knows her place. The words hit me like a physical slap. I stood frozen in the hallway, my hand still on the door handle. My father wasn't even cold in the ground, and they were already carving me up, deciding what I deserved based on my marital status and my uterus. I walked into the drawing room. The fire was roaring, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. George was pacing, a tumbler of Dad's best scotch in his hand. Angela was sitting on the velvet sofa, looking regal in her black morning dress, her eyes dry and calculating. They both stopped when they saw me. "Finally," George said, not offering a hug, not asking how I was. "Did you get the check?" "I got the will," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I walked over to the sideboard and poured myself a glass of water, refusing to look at them. Simon read it to me. "And?" Angela asked, leaning forward. "I assume he explained the mistake." "There was no mistake, Mother." I turned to face them. "Dad left the bulk of the estate to me. George gets his stipend and the forgiveness of his debts." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum, sucking the air out of the room. George's face went from flushed to pale, then to a deep, violent shade of red. "Debts? What debts?" "The 200,000 you borrowed over the last 5 years," I said calmly. "Dad kept records, George, every penny." Those were gifts," George sputtered, slamming his glass down on the antique table. "He gave that to me. I have a family, Martha. I have responsibilities you have. What? A cat, a career." "I have the respect of the man who earned this money," I shot back, the anger finally sparking in my chest. "Unlike you." "Don't you dare speak to your brother that way," Angela snapped, standing up. "He is a father. He is the head of this family now that your father is gone." "He is a leech, Mother," I said, the truth tumbling out before I could check it. "And Dad knew it. That's why he did this." "Fix it," George hissed, stepping into my personal space. He smelled of scotch and expensive cologne, a cologne I knew cost £300 a bottle, bought with money he apparently didn't have. "You go back to Simon tomorrow, and you sign over the rights to the portfolio. You can keep the apartment, I don't care. But the liquid cash and the stocks come to me. I need them." "Or what?" I challenged, looking up at him. "Or you are no longer welcome in this house," Angela said, her voice ice cold. "If you steal your brother's birthright, Martha, you are stealing from my grandchildren, and I will not have a thief in my home." I looked at them. My mother, who I had nursed through pneumonia last winter while George was skiing in the Alps. My brother, whose credit card debt I had secretly paid off 3 years ago so his wife wouldn't find out. They looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. "The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself," I whispered, thinking of the high blood pressure Dad had battled for years, stress-induced, no doubt. "What?" George barked. "Nothing," I said, gripping my purse strap. "I need to think." "You have until the morning," George said, turning his back on me to pour another drink. "Do the right thing, Martha. For once in your life, think of someone other than yourself." I turned and walked out. I didn't go to my apartment. I didn't go to a hotel. I got into a cab and said 2 words that would change the trajectory of my life forever. Heathrow Airport. The terminal was a blur of fluorescent lights and weary travelers, a stark contrast to the gothic gloom of my mother's drawing room. I sat in the executive lounge, a perk of the job that kept me on the road 6 months a year, staring at a glass of white wine I hadn't touched. My phone was vibrating incessantly on the table. George, 5 missed calls, Mom, 3 missed calls, George, don't be dramatic. Come back and sign the papers. Mom, we are family, Martha, don't do this. I turned the phone face down. My hands were shaking, not from fear anymore, but from a potent cocktail of adrenaline and heartbreak. I had booked a one-way ticket to Singapore. It was far, it was efficient, and most importantly, it was a jurisdiction where I had a secure banking contact and a quiet hotel room booked under a company alias. I needed distance, physical, emotional, and legal distance. I opened my laptop. The airport Wi-Fi was secure enough for what I needed to do initially. I logged into the family trust portal. As the new sole trustee, another detail Simon had gleaned from the will, I had full administrative access. What I saw made my stomach drop. The stipend George was supposed to be living on was generous, £5,000 a month. But the withdrawals from the joint account, my mother-controlled, the one meant for household maintenance and her care, were astronomical. Waitrose, £450. Selfridges, £1,200. Elite Motors, £800 monthly lease. Private school tuition, £6,000 quarterly. Angela was funding George's lifestyle directly out of her widow's allocation. She was bleeding her own future dry to keep him in designer suits, and now that the main tap, Dad, was turned off, they were panicking. They didn't just want my inheritance for growth or investment. They needed it to plug a hole that was hemorrhaging cash. I took a screenshot, then another. I saved them to an encrypted folder named Evidence. Boarding for Flight SQ-319 to Singapore is now beginning. The overhead announcement chimed. I stood up, slinging my laptop bag over my shoulder. I felt a strange sensation, like a phantom limb where my family used to be. I was running away, yes, but I was also regrouping. As I walked down the jet bridge, my phone buzzed again. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. It was a voicemail from Angela. I pressed play, holding the phone to my ear as I stepped onto the plane. Martha, her voice was distorted, shrill. George tells me you've left the house. You are being incredibly selfish. Those children need security. Your father was sick. His mind wasn't right when he signed that will. We are going to contest it if you don't fix this. George has found a lawyer who says we can prove undue influence. Don't make us drag your father's name through the mud. Transfer the funds to the joint account by tomorrow, or don't bother coming home. Ever. The line clicked dead. I found my seat 4A by the window. The stewardess offered me a hot towel, her smile warm and professional. Champagne before takeoff, madam. Water, please, I said, my voice rasping. Undue influence. That was their angle. They were going to claim I, the daughter who visited once a week and managed the books, had manipulated a dying man. It was laughable, but in court, it would be messy. It would freeze the assets for years. However, as I looked out at the tarmac, watching the rain streak horizontally across the glass, a cold resolve settled over me. They thought they were dealing with Martha, the quiet little sister who nodded and fixed the spreadsheets. They thought they were dealing with a pushover. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. Dad hadn't just left me the money, he had left me the records, all of them. I reached into my bag and touched the small, encrypted hard drive Simon had slipped into my hand right before I left his office. Your father wanted you to have the backups, he had said, just in case. I didn't know exactly what was on that drive yet, but knowing my father's meticulous nature, it wasn't just receipts. It was leverage. The plane taxied, the engines roaring to life, pushing me back into the seat. I wasn't just flying to Singapore to hide. I was flying there to work. I had 12 hours of flight time, a laptop, and the skills of a forensic accountant who had taken down Ponzi schemes more sophisticated than George's fumbling greed. By the time I landed, I wouldn't just be the sister who ran away. I would be the executioner of their lifestyle. The cabin lights dimmed, casting the plane into a hushed twilight. While other passengers reclined their seats and put on eye masks, I ordered a black coffee and opened the hard drive. To understand why this betrayal cut so deep, You have to understand the dynamic of the house I grew up in. George was the son. He was the firstborn, the boy, the one who played rugby and charmed the neighbors. I was the moon, necessary for the tides, perhaps, but meant to stay in the background, reflecting light but never generating it. When George failed his A-levels, it was the school's fault. When I got straight A's, it was expected. When George got a girl pregnant at 22, a situation Dad quietly fixed with a check and a hush-hush arrangement, he was just a spirited lad. When I focused on my career, skipping family holidays to study for my CPA exams, I was cold and unnatural. I sacrificed my 20s to that family. I managed their taxes. I negotiated their insurance. When Dad got sick 3 years ago, I moved back in for 6 months to manage his palliative care so Angela wouldn't have to lift a finger. I changed his IVs. I sat with him through the morphine hallucinations. George visited on Sundays for roast dinner, usually asking for a loan before dessert was served. I opened the first folder on the drive, Ledger Private 2019-2024. My father's notes were thorough. June 2021, George requested £15,000. Investment in crypto startup. Status, lost, no repayment. Dec 2022, George requested £25,000. Roof repair for the house. Note, checked Zillow. House was listed for sale 2 months later. He used the money to clear gambling debt. Gambling. I paused, my fingers hovering over the trackpad. I knew George liked the ponies, but I didn't. Know it was this bad. I scrolled down. August 2023, Angela requested access to emergency fund. Reason, George needs help with legal fees. Amount, £40,000. I frowned, legal fees. George hadn't been sued that I knew of. I cross-referenced this with the emails stored on the drive. Dad had archived everything. I found an email chain between Dad and a solicitor I didn't recognize. Subject, settlement G. Wilkins, Mr. Wilkins. The other party is willing to settle the assault charge out of court for $40,000, provided the NDA is signed immediately. Assault, my breath caught in my throat. George had assaulted someone, and Mom knew. They had used Dad's dying days to cover up a crime, all while telling me I needed to step up and handle the grocery shopping because they were too stressed. This was the antagonist I was facing. Not just a greedy brother, but a man who had been shielded from consequences his entire life by a mother who would burn the world down to keep him warm. George wasn't just between jobs, as he claimed. He was a liability, a dangerous, entitled man who viewed people as resources to be consumed. And now, he was looking at me not as a sister, but as his next bank account. The email from Angela, transfer it to him or don't bother coming home, flashed in my mind. She wasn't protecting the family. She was protecting her investment in him. She had bet everything on the golden child, and if he failed, she failed. I looked at the timestamps. They had been lying to me for years. Every family dinner, every Christmas, they had smiled and eaten the food I cooked, all while hiding a mountain of rot beneath the floorboards. I minimized the window as the stewardess walked by. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. It was the feeling I got right before I testified in court against a fraudster. It was the absence of doubt. I wasn't going to transfer the money. I wasn't going to negotiate. I was going to use my profession. I was going to conduct a forensic audit on my own family. I opened a new document and titled it, Operation Insolvency. If George wanted to play dirty, he was about to learn that he was playing against a professional. He had the charm, sure. He had the love of our mother, but I had the passwords. And as the plane flew over the dark expanse of the ocean, leaving England behind, I realized something else. They relied on the monthly trust distribution to pay the mortgage on Angela's house. The trust I now controlled. I logged into the banking portal for the family trust. Status, active. Next scheduled payment, 1st of the month tomorrow. Beneficiary, Angela Wilkins. I moved my cursor to the edit button. Suspend automatic payments. Reason, investigation pending. I clicked yes. Then I went to the secondary account, the one that paid George's stipend. Suspend automatic payments. Reason, audit of debts. I clicked yes. I sat back, watching the confirmation wheel spin. Changes saved. Enjoy the flight, George, I whispered to the empty seat beside me, because the landing is going to be rough. The humidity of Singapore hit me the moment I stepped out of Changi Airport, a stark, sticky contrast to the bone-deep chill of London. It was 7:00 a.m. local time. In London, it was midnight. The first of the month had officially begun. I checked into the Marina Bay Sands, not for the luxury, but for the anonymity. I booked a suite under the name of my consulting firm, Veritas Analytics, paid for with a corporate card that didn't link back to my personal accounts. By the time I set up my mobile command center on the glass desk overlooking the bay, 2 laptops, a secure satellite phone, and the hard drive, my personal phone was glowing hot with notifications. Bank alert, scheduled transfer failed, insufficient authorization. Bank alert, scheduled transfer failed, account frozen. Then came the human fallout. Angela, 12:05 a.m. GMT. Martha, the mortgage payment didn't go through. There must be a glitch. Fix it immediately. George, 12:15 a.m. GMT. My card just got declined at the club. This isn't funny. Unfreeze the trust. Angela, 12:30 a.m. GMT. Pick up the phone. George is frantic. George, 12:45 a.m. GMT. You petty bitch. I know you did this. Turn it back on or I'm calling the police. I silenced the phone and placed it face down on the desk. Let them sweat. Panic was a powerful catalyst. It made people sloppy, and sloppy people left paper trails. I cracked my knuckles and opened the primary laptop. It was time to see exactly what George's business investments really were. Dad's ledger had given me the starting point, the £200,000 in loans, but I needed to know where the current cash bleed was going. If I was going to defend my decision to cut them off in court, I needed proof that the money wasn't being used for essential maintenance or health care, as the trust stipulations required. I pulled up the transaction history for the account Angela used to send George his money. SH. E was clever, or she thought she was. She didn't send cash directly to him anymore. Instead, she paid bills on his behalf. Payee GW Consulting Limited. Amount £4,500. Frequency monthly. GW Consulting, I muttered, typing the name into the UK company's house database. It was a registered entity, active for 2 years. Director, George Wilkins. Nature of business, management consultancy activities other than financial management. It looked legitimate on the surface, but forensic accounting is about looking at the friction points, where the money enters and where it exits. I pulled the bank statements for the trust account again. The payments to GW Consulting were made via BACS transfer. I cross-referenced the receiving account number. Because I now controlled the estate, I had the authority to request a trace and recover inquiry on any suspicious transactions from the past 90 days. It was a nuclear option usually reserved for fraud cases, but technically, as trustee, it was my fiduciary duty. I logged into the banking backend and flagged the last 3 payments to GW Consulting as erroneous suspicious. This didn't recover the money immediately, but it triggered a generated report from the receiving bank regarding the account's status. 10 minutes later, the automated report landed in my secure inbox. Account name, GW Consulting Limited. Balance, £14.50. Recent outgoing transactions, 1 Ladbrokes Online, £2,000. 2 William Hill, £1,500. 3 Pure Gym membership, £49.99. £4 The Dorchester Bar Tab, £935.51. I sat back, exhaling a long, shaky breath. There was no business. There were no clients. My mother was funneling trust money meant for her old age, into a shell company so George could gamble and drink it away, all while pretending he was a consultant. I took a screenshot, adding it to the evidence folder. But I needed more. I needed to know why Angela was so terrified of him failing. A mother's love is powerful, but enabling this level of destruction usually pointed to something darker, blackmail, or shared guilt. I picked up the satellite phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 2 years. "Make it quick, Martha. It's 1:00 a.m., a gravelly voice answered. It was Kenji, a private investigator I'd worked with on a massive corporate embezzlement case in 2021. He was expensive, discreet, and based in London. "I need a physical surveillance job, Kenji. Starts now." "Who's the target?" "My brother, George Wilkins, and my mother, Angela Wilkins." There was a pause. "Family work? I don't like family work, Martha. It gets messy." "I'm paying double your rate, and I need you to pull the court records for a settlement involving George from August last year. Dad's note said assault, but I need the police report. I need to know who he hit." "Double rate plus expenses." "Done. I'll have the report by sunrise London time. I'll put a tail on George as soon as he leaves the house." I hung up. I was tired, my eyes felt like they were filled with sand, but I couldn't sleep. I was building a cage bar by iron bar, and I couldn't rest until the lock was turned. My phone began to ring again at 9:00 a.m. Singapore time. This time, it wasn't a text. It was a FaceTime request from Angela. I stared at the screen. I could ignore it, continue my work in silence. But avoidance would look like guilt. If I wanted to flush them out, I had to poke the bear. I propped the phone up against a stack of legal pads, adjusted the lighting so I looked calm and professional, not like a woman who had fled the country in the middle of the night, and pressed accept. The screen filled with the image of my mother's drawing room. Angela was holding the phone, the angle unflattering, showing the tension in her neck. George was pacing in the background, looking disheveled, still wearing yesterday's shirt. "Where are you?" Angela demanded, her voice shrill. "The background? That's not your apartment. Is that a hotel?" "Hello, Mother. Hello, George," I said, my voice cool and even. "I'm traveling for work. I told you I had business to attend to." "Business?" George stormed toward the phone, his face filling the frame. His eyes were bloodshot. "You cut the money, Martha. The trust account is frozen. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I suspended the payments pending an audit," I corrected him. "As the new trustee, I have a legal obligation to review all recurring expenses before authorizing them. It's standard procedure." "Standard procedure?" George spit the words out. "I have bills due today. My mortgage direct debit will bounce in 3 hours." "Then perhaps you should pay it from your earnings," I said. "How is GW Consulting doing, George?" George froze. The color drained from his face so fast it was almost comical. He stepped back, glancing nervously at Angela. Business is slow," he stammered. "The market is volatile." "Is it?" I looked down at my laptop, pretending to read. "Because according to the bank records I'm looking at right now, GW Consulting seems to be investing heavily in the gaming sector. Specifically, Ladbrokes and William Hill." Angela gasped. "Martha, that is private information. You have no right." "I have every right." I slammed my hand on the desk, the first crack in my composure. "It's trust money, Mother. It's Dad's money. You are laundering his legacy through a fake company so George can gamble it away." "It's not gambling," Angela shrieked, her defense instinctive and irrational. "He is trading. He's trying to build something for his children." "He spent £900 at the Dorchester bar last week," I said coldly. "Is that trading? Was he short-selling vodka tonics?" "You listen to me," George snarled, leaning into the phone again, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. "You don't know what's going on here. You think you're so smart with your spreadsheets. You turn that money back on, or I sue you for mismanagement. I'll tie that inheritance up in court for 10 years. You won't see a penny." "Go ahead," I challenged him. "Sue me, and when we get to discovery, I'll submit the police report from last August." The silence on the other end was absolute. It was heavier than the silence in Simon's office. It was the silence of a grave. Angela's hand covered her mouth. George looked like he had been punched in the gut. "I know about the assault, George," I continued, my heart hammering against my ribs but my voice remaining steady. "I know Dad paid £40,000 to keep you out of prison. I know you hurt someone, and I know Mom helped you cover it up." "It was an accident," George whispered, his bravado crumbling. "The guy, he provoked me. It was a bar fight." "Dad died stressing about that money," I said, feeling a tear finally slip down my cheek. "He died knowing his son was a violent criminal and his wife was an accomplice, and you have the audacity to ask me for more." "We needed to protect the family name," Angela cried out, tears streaming down her face now. "What was I supposed to do, Martha? Let him go to jail? He has children." "Then he should have thought about them before he threw a punch," I said. "The money stays frozen. The audit continues. If you want a single penny from me, George, you will provide full, audited accounts for your business and proof of addiction counseling. Otherwise, get a job." "You can't do this," George screamed, his face twisting into something ugly and unrecognizable. "I am the man of this house." "Not anymore," I said. "Now, you're just a line item I'm about to delete." I ended the call. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the edge of the desk. I felt sick. Saying it out loud made it real. My family wasn't just dysfunctionally greedy, they were morally bankrupt. They had used my father, a good, honest man, as a piggy bank to fund their vices and clean up their crimes. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the glittering skyline of Singapore. I had won the skirmish, but the war was just starting. George wouldn't back down. He was desperate, and desperate men were dangerous. My computer pinged. It was an email from Simon, the family attorney. Subject: urgent application for emergency injunction. I hurried back to the desk. "Martha, I just received notice. George has retained a solicitor, a shark named Fletcher. They are filing an emergency ex parte motion in the High Court tomorrow morning. They are claiming you have absconded with the estate assets and are mentally unstable due to grief. They are asking the court to remove you as trustee immediately and appoint Angela as interim executor. If they get this order, they will drain the accounts before you can fly back. We need to move fast." I stared at the screen. They were going for the nuclear option. They were going to try and declare me insane. Mentally unstable. The words burned on the screen. It was the oldest trick in the book for discrediting women who dared to control money. I called Simon immediately. "How fast can they get this hearing?" I asked, skipping the pleasantries. "Tomorrow morning, 10:00 a.m., Simon sounded breathless. "Fletcher is claiming peril to the estate. Because you're in Singapore and the funds are frozen, he's spinning a narrative that you're vindictive and erratic. If the judge grants the interim order, Angela gets control back until a full trial. And by the time a trial happens, the money will be gone." "I need to file a countermotion," I said. "I have evidence of embezzlement." "It's not enough," Simon warned. "Embezzlement takes time to prove. We need something that disqualifies Angela from being a trustee immediately. We need proof of fraud or breach of fiduciary duty to your father while he was alive." I hung up and turned back to the hard drive. I had the gambling, the fake company, the assault payoff. But that was all bad judgment, not necessarily technical fraud. Against my father, in a way that would legally bar Angela from trusteeship instantly. I needed to find the mechanism. How did they get the money out so fast? I went back to the Ledger Private folder. I started opening every file, looking for inconsistencies. I found it in a folder labeled Property Maintenance. There was a scanned document, Loan Agreement against the Kensington Estate, dated 6 months ago. Amount, £150,000. Lender, a private equity firm with predatory rates. Signatures, Robert Wilkins, my father, and Angela Wilkins. I zoomed in on my father's signature. My father had a tremor in his right hand for the last 2 years of his life. His signature had become shaky, spider-like. But this signature? This was bold, looping, and firm. It looked like his signature from 20 years ago, or a very good trace of it. I opened another document, his actual medical directives signed 2 days before the loan. The signature was barely legible, a shaky scrawl. I put the 2 images side by side on my monitor. The difference was undeniable. "He didn't sign this," I whispered. If my father didn't sign it, George or Angela did. And if they leveraged the house that was supposed to be part of the trust, using a forged signature, that was mortgage fraud. And since Angela co-signed it and notarized it, she was a justice of the peace, a title she held onto for social clout. She had committed a felony. But I needed to be sure. I couldn't just claim it looked fake. I forwarded the documents to Kenji. "Martha, need an urgent handwriting analysis. Compare document A, medical, with document B, loan. I need a certified expert opinion within 4 hours. Can you do it?" Kenji, 3 minutes later. "I know a guy who used to work for Scotland Yard Fraud Squad. It'll cost you." "Martha, pay him whatever he wants." While I waited, the sun began to set over the marina. The sky turned a bruised purple. I paced the hotel room, my mind racing. If I used this, I was sending my mother to prison, or at least exposing her to the risk of it. I thought about the voicemail, transfer it, or don't bother coming home. I thought about George's sneer, "You have a cat, I have a family." They had already decided I was expendable. They had already decided to frame me as crazy. The email from Kenji arrived 4 hours later. It contained a PDF with a formal letterhead from a forensic document examiner. Conclusion: high probability of simulation. The signature on the loan agreement shows signs of tracing and lacks the natural tremor associated with the reference samples from the same time period. Furthermore, the pen pressure indicates a younger writer mimicking the style. It is my professional opinion that the signature of Robert Wilkins is a forgery. I had the smoking gun. I didn't send it to Simon yet. I sent it to them. I composed a new email. To George Wilkins, Angela Wilkins, CC, Simon attorney, Fletcher their attorney. Subject: immediate withdrawal of petition. George, mother. Attached is a forensic analysis of the signature on the £150,000 loan taken out against the house 6 months ago. As you can see, the expert has confirmed it is a forgery. If you proceed with the emergency hearing tomorrow to remove me as trustee, I will submit this document to the judge and simultaneously file a criminal complaint for mortgage fraud and forgery against both of you. You have 1 hour to withdraw your petition and resign your claim to the estate. If you do not, I will not only cut you off, I will see you prosecuted. The choice is yours. Martha. I hit send. I watched the seconds tick by on the clock. 1 minute, 2 minutes. My phone rang. It wasn't FaceTime. It was a voice call from George. I picked it up. "You wouldn't," he breathed, his voice trembling with genuine terror. Mom is a JP. She'd lose her standing. She'd go to jail." "Then you shouldn't have let her witness a forged signature, George," I said, my voice void of any warmth. "You did this. You got greedy. You thought I was too stupid to check the files." "Martha, please," he was crying now. "I owe money to bad people. If I don't pay this loan, they're going to hurt me. Real hurt, not legal hurt." So that was the truth. The gambling wasn't just a habit, it was a debt to loan sharks. "That sounds like a you problem," I said. "Withdraw the petition, confess to Simon, or I send the file to the police. You have 55 minutes. "Martha." 54 minutes. I hung up and stared at the phone. My hand hovered over the block button, but I needed to keep the line open for their surrender. I was alone in a hotel room on the other side of the world, thousands of miles from the people who were supposed to love me. But as I looked at the evidence of their betrayal, I realized I wasn't the one who was lost. They were, and I was finally, for the first time in my life, holding the map. The 54 minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. I sat in the darkened hotel room, the glow of the monitors illuminating the remnants of my room service dinner. At the 53rd minute, an email notification pinged. From Fletcher and Associates subject, notice of withdrawal of petition to the High Court, Simon Atherton. We formally withdraw the emergency application for removal of trustee. I exhaled, a sound that was half laugh, half sob. They had blinked. But a withdrawal wasn't a surrender. It was a retreat to regroup. I knew George. He was a cornered animal now, and with the loan sharks breathing down his neck, he wouldn't stop just because a judge was off the table. He needed money, and he needed it now. The next morning in Singapore, evening in London, my security alert system on my phone triggered. Motion detected. Kensington Estate Master Study. Motion detected. Kensington Estate Wine Cellar. I opened the app. My father had installed a robust security system years ago, mostly to monitor the staff, but he had given me the admin codes when his health declined. I switched to the live feed. The house was full of people. I checked the calendar. Of course, today was the post-funeral remembrance tea. A gathering of the extended family, Aunt Sarah, Uncle Mike, the cousins, and several of Dad's old business partners. It was a social event Angela wouldn't dare cancel, as appearance was everything to her. But on the camera in the study, away from the guests, I saw George. He wasn't mourning. He was ransacking. He was pulling paintings off the walls, Dad's prized 19th century maritime collection. He was stacking them by the side door. "He's stealing the art," I whispered to the empty room. "He's going to sell it for cash tonight." And Mom was standing right there, watching him. "Be careful, George," I heard her voice through the camera's microphone. "Uncle Mike will notice if the turner is missing. Take the smaller ones." She wasn't stopping him. She was curating the theft. Something inside me finally snapped. I had tried to handle this quietly. I had tried to use legal threats to contain the rot, but the rot was systemic. They were desecrating my father's memory while his friends were drinking tea in the next room. I looked at the time. The guests were all in the main drawing room. The study opened directly into it. "Okay," I said, typing furiously. "You want to put on a show? Let's put on a show." I accessed the smart home hub. The house was wired with a high-end audio-visual system Dad used for presentations. There was a large drop-down projection screen in the drawing room, currently displaying a polite slideshow of Dad's life, photos of him fishing, him at weddings. I hijacked the source feed. I didn't switch it off. I mirrored my laptop screen to their projector. Then I initiated a video call, patching the audio through the house speakers. On my monitor, I saw the feed change. In the drawing room in London, the gentle slide of Dad fishing disappeared. It was replaced by my face, looming 10 feet tall in high definition, staring down at the tea-drinking guests. The chatter in the room died instantly. "Martha," Aunt Sarah asked, stepping toward the screen. "Is that you, dear? We thought you couldn't make it." I ignored the guests. "George, Mother, come into the drawing room, now." My voice boomed through the surround sound speakers, shaking the crystal in the cabinets. On the security cam, I saw George and Angela freeze in the study. They looked terrified. They hurried into the drawing room, George still holding a small oil painting under his arm. "Turn it off," George hissed, rushing toward the AV cabinet. "She's hacked it, turn it off." "Don't touch it, George," I commanded. "Or I play the clip of you assaulting that man in the pub last August, the one Dad paid £40,000 to silence." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Uncle Mike, a stern man who had co-founded Dad's first company, stood up. "What is she talking about?" "It's a lie," Angela shrieked, her poise shattering. "She's distraught. She's having a breakdown." "I am perfectly sane, Mother," I said, my voice calm, amplified, and inescapable. "And I am done protecting you." I switched the screen share. The evidence folder appeared. "Uncle Mike," I said, addressing the room, "you asked why I froze the trust. You asked why I locked the accounts." I clicked the first file. The bank statement for GW Consulting popped up, massive and undeniable. "This is where the trust money went," I narrated. "Ladbrokes, William Hill, not for the grandchildren, not for the house, for gambling." That's a mistake," George stammered, looking around at the horrified faces of his relatives. "It was market research." "And this," I clicked the next file, bringing up the forged loan agreement and the forensic report. "Is the mortgage fraud my mother committed 6 months ago. She forged Dad's signature to take out £150,000. Against the house you are all standing in." The room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Angela swayed on her feet, clutching the back of a sofa. "Angela," Aunt Sarah whispered, "did you?" "He needed it," Angela cried out, pointing a trembling finger at George. "He said he was in trouble. He said they would break his legs. I had to save my son." "So you stole from your husband?" I asked, my voice cutting through her hysterics. "You stole from the man who worked for 40 years to build this roof, and you handed it to a loan shark." Angela looked at George. She looked at the guests. She looked at the painting George was still clutching. And then the realization hit her. I saw it happen. I saw the moment the fog lifted. She looked at George, really looked at him, not as her golden boy, but as the man who was currently trying to sneak out the side door with a stolen painting while she took the blame. "George," she whispered, "put the painting back." "Shut up, Mom," George snapped, his mask fully gone now. "We're done, I'm leaving." "You told me the money was for a business investment," Angela said, her voice rising, cracking with betrayal. "You told me the loan was for a startup. You told me the gambling debts were small. You spent it all, the whole $150,000. "It's gone," George yelled, turning on her. "It's all gone. Are you happy? And thanks to your bitch of a daughter, I can't get any more." He turned to the door, but Uncle Mike blocked his path. Mike was 65, but he was built like a dockworker. "You're not going anywhere, son," Mike said, crossing his arms. "Not with Robert's property." George looked at Mike, then at the screen where I was watching. He dropped the painting. It clattered on the floor. "I hate you," he screamed at the screen. "I hope you die alone with your money." "I might be alone," I replied, feeling a weight lift off my chest. "But I can sleep at night. Can you?" I ended the call. The screen went black. The silence in my hotel room was profound, but for the first time in days, it wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. I didn't fly back immediately. I let the dust settle from a distance. Simon handled the immediate aftermath. Uncle Mike, bless him, had called the police regarding the attempted theft of the art, but Angela had refused to press charges. However, the exposure had done its work. The GW Consulting revelation had triggered an investigation by the tax authorities, a little tip-off I may have automated before I went to sleep, and the loan sharks, realizing the family tap was dry, had come calling. George was forced to declare bankruptcy. His car was repossessed. His wife, finally seeing the full extent of the deception I had unveiled on that projector, took the children and moved to her parents' house in Leeds. She filed for divorce a week later. George didn't go to prison for the forgery. I declined to testify on one condition, but he was socially exiled. He ended up working manual labor in a warehouse in Bristol, living in a bedsit, far away from the checkbook he had abused for decades. But the hardest part was dealing with Angela. I returned to London 3 weeks later. I walked into the house, which was now quiet. The servants had been let go. We couldn't afford them with the debts George had racked up. I found Angela in the conservatory. She looked smaller, older. The regal matriarch was gone, replaced by a frail woman staring at the rain. She didn't look up when I entered. "He won't answer my calls," she said softly. "He blames you," I said, sitting down opposite her. "Narcissists always blame the person who stops giving them what they want." Angela turned to look at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "I thought I was helping him, I thought, if I just got him through the rough patch." "He was 40 years old, Mom. It wasn't a patch, it was a lifestyle." "I failed him," she whispered, "and I failed your father." Yes, I said honestly, you did. She flinched. She expected me to comfort her, to offer platitudes, but I was done with lies. And you failed me, I added. You were ready to throw me to the wolves. You threatened to disown me for protecting Dad's wishes. Angela covered her face with her hands and began to weep. It was a harsh, ugly sound. I was scared, Martha. I was so scared. He told me. He told me he would kill himself if he didn't get the money. He manipulated me. I reached out and placed a hand on hers. It wasn't a gesture of total forgiveness that would take years, but it was a start. I know, I said softly, but it stops now. I pulled a folder from my bag. I've sold the Kensington house, I said. Angela's head snapped up. Sold it, but where will I go? The debts George created against the property have to be paid. The $150,000 plus the interest plus the legal fees. The house is the only way to clear the slate. Panic rose in her eyes again. Ma. Artha, please. I bought a cottage, I interrupted. In the Cotswolds, it's small, 2 bedrooms. Near Aunt Sarah, it's fully paid for. It's in my name, so George can never touch it. You can live there for the rest of your life, rent-free. You'll have a modest stipend from the remaining trust income, enough for food, heating, and a simple life. She stared at me, processing the shift in power. She was no longer the Queen of Kensington. She was a guest in my world. And George, she asked weakly. George is not allowed on the property, I said firmly. If he shows up, the police will be called. That is the condition of your tenancy. You cut the cord or you're on your own. Angela looked at the photos of Dad I had placed on the table. She looked at the sale documents. She took a deep breath, and for the first time in my life, I saw her straighten her spine not with arrogance, but with resignation. He really is a monster, isn't he? She whispered. He's a man who never heard the word no, I said, until now. She picked up the pen. Her hand shook, but she signed the agreement. Thank you, Martha, she said, her voice breaking, for saving me from him and from myself. I walked out of the house and into the cool London air. The rain had stopped. The sky was a pale, washed-out blue.